This is incredible. Well, welcome to the good people who have tuned in here to our pastor's Bible study. We're all here, at least for this week, before you guys both abandon me next week.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to pull any person off the street to come in here and talk about the Bible with me.
That's going to hurt his feelings.
Yeah, it'll be the highest ratings we've ever had, you know. But we are excited to talk about the book of Daniel today, and
Great sermon
confirming
Sunday.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I paid him to say that, but yeah, we book of Daniel is one of those that I think we know a few of the stories very well. Actually, we're going to talk about today one of the stories that we know very well from the book of Daniel. But then there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of weird vision type stuff that I dealt with a little bit. But I hope you guys had fun reading about all the beasts and speculating about all the human history that it may or may not be referring to. So you can find, if you Google stuff, you can find however many articles you want talking about. Yeah,
some apocalyptic literature.
Apocalyptic, yes.
Lift the cover off.
Yeah.
Reveal the unknown.
Yeah, yeah, lots of good stuff in Daniel. We're going to focus on chapter 3, though. And chapter 3 is the story, we usually call it the fiery furnace.
Were those their first names or last names? Shadrach. Meshach,
well, you know what? I'm glad you asked, because those were their Babylonian names, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Originally, their names were Hananiah, Mishael, and
right.
Azariah.
That's right.
When Anna and I were going through this, I was today years old when I realized that it's not Abednego, but Abednego.
Yes. I'm so glad. I was actually going to bring that up. Yeah, Abednego is not the proper way to say it.
Get to have him be like Abednego. He's like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know who you're talking about.
It's like, he makes him sound more flexible.
Yeah.
More bendy. Yeah. But it's Abednego. Yeah, I know. So, and then Daniel doesn't get called by his, Belteshazzar, I think is his Babylonian name, but Daniel sticks for some reason.
Where was he, by the way?
Where was who?
Daniel. Why
Where
did
was he in this?
Why did he get thrown in?
I was wondering the same thing. Yeah, Daniel was bowing down. No, I'm just kidding. That wasn't true. That's not true, guys. But yeah,
my commentary has two suggestions.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that. I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
We'll weave it in seamlessly. But we have this story here. King Nebuchadnezzar, who plays a vital role in the first 4 chapters of this book. And it's a real roller coaster ride with this guy. It's up and down between him thinking he's a god or worshiping other gods and then praising the name of the one true God. But he builds this big image, and we're going to read about it here in just a minute. Now, I remember in Sunday school, maybe you guys will say the same thing, maybe not. I remember learning that this image was of himself.
Yeah.
But it does not say that.
No, it does not.
So it could be that it was a likeness of King Nebuchadnezzar, but it also could have just been some god. That's what my study Bible says.
So
likely it was the Babylonian god Bel.
So it doesn't rule out the possibility of it being in the image of a bunny.
Yeah, see, that's where I was hoping we would go here too.
An image of what?
A bunny.
A bunny?
Do we have any VeggieTales fans out there here on the broadcast today? So the VeggieTales did. This is the one. Yeah, I was right there with you. We talked about this actually in our small group Bible study last night. It's this, instead of the Babylonian Empire and the VeggieTales retelling of it, it's this chocolate factory, and like the CEO builds this giant statue of a chocolate bunny, and they all bow down. They're supposed to bow down to it, and these 3 people don't do it. They refuse to do it, and they are going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. So check it out, VeggieTales, a great way to learn about Bible stories back in the 90s, I guess, that animated show.
Yes.
But either way, there's some type of image that everyone is being commanded to bow down and worship. And so we'll see what happens here. Pastor Buegler, would you read verses 1 through 7? So we're in Daniel chapter 3,
All right.
verses 1 through 7.
All right, follow along or listen carefully. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials could come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. There you go.
So we haven't even gotten to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego yet, but we will. You guys know that they're coming. But I want to pause right there, and as a bit of a curveball, I want to ask you guys if you remember what the fourth commandment is.
I do.
I do too.
Okay.
I just honor your father and mother.
Okay, so honor your father and your mother, but then, as with all the commandments, they're actually bigger than just what is said in the statement. Luther walks us through that, because you can sometimes with the commandments you can kind of be like, well,
I got that one covered.
Haven't killed anybody
Yeah.
Recently, and so I'm doing pretty good on that one. But then it's like, oh well, actually, if I even call someone a fool, Jesus brings that up too. If I have hate in my heart for someone, if I hurt them in any way, then I'm guilty of the fifth commandment. So the fourth commandment then would also encompass not just our mom and dad, but other figures of who are in authority positions over us. So this might sound kind of weird, but how is the fourth commandment a blessing from God? There's the whole structure of it. Yeah.
Well, God is a God of order, and authority is a part of the system of order that God created in the beginning. And so he places, for example, teachers over students. It's a better deal if the teacher is to be honored, just like honor your father and mother. Honor in the classroom, for example, a teacher. Why? Well, when I was in high school, we had a math teacher that you couldn't get away with anything. I mean, he was very strict, and he ruled the classroom with authority. And we had an English teacher who we could get away with anything. It was chaos in English class. When we took our college exams, guess what? The verbal, we all did terrible. The nonverbal, we all did great. Because it's a blessing to live in order. Same way with the laws of the land, shall we say. When there was no sheriff in Pecos, it was chaos. God is not a God of chaos. He's a God of order. So he even specifically tells us in the New Testament to honor the government. What if it's a bad government? Well, honor it. Because bad government and order is better than good government and chaos or no government. So the fourth commandment is really a blessing of authority. Mm-hmm. And we could add the home, we could add, I think I know where you're going with this.
Do you?
He clearly says we should obey. We're supposed to pay taxes to Caesar or not.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, see?
Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar. Mm-hmm. But then, unto God the things that are God. So there's going to be the possibility that authorities clash. Mm-hmm. and but yet authority is a blessing from God. I want to live in a situation of order
Okay.
rather than chaos. That's a blessing to me.
All right. Pastor Josh, anything to add, or do you want me to give you put you on the spot with a question?
Oh gosh, my first thought was, well, I don't know what I can add to that, but I don't know if I want to be put on the spot. So
Neither.
Well, what if you had a very simple answer? If I said, why do we obey authorities then? Like, what would you guys say? We'll let Pastor Josh take a crack at it first.
Well, you're obeying God. In one sense, it's in the simplest sense, when Jesus says, when you gave me, or when you visited those who are sick, when you gave food to the hungry, you did it to me. So in the simplest sense, you're honoring Jesus, you're honoring God by how you honor your authority, but then even in a broader sense, or maybe I switched broad and specific, whatever, God has put authority over us, and we're supposed to honor it that way.
Good, yeah. That's how I have generally taught, in confirmation or something, the fourth commandment. Why do we honor these people? Why do we obey them? Well, it's because God has placed them over us. They're
good.
authority. Yeah, exactly. For our good, for order, for peace. Now, we can always give examples of times where authority figures don't do what they're supposed to do. They abuse their power, and we see that in the book of Daniel. But okay, so this is kind of the structure that God has woven into the fabric of society, and as a general rule, authority figures are representing God, and they are blessings to us. So now, another commandment that you guys have heard of is the first commandment. And so we have, you shall have no other gods before me. So God should be taking, the number one spot in your life. God ultimately is the authority over all other authorities. And so I think that plays into Daniel chapter 3 is what happens when the fourth commandment and the first commandment are kind of butting heads with one another.
Yeah. Well, that's what I talked about when they come into tension. And it happened in the New Testament too, when Peter and John after Pentecost were arrested, and they let them out, and they said, "Now don't go talking about Jesus anymore." The authorities, and Peter's answer, John's answer was, "We must obey God rather than men."
Yeah.
So when it comes into those conflicted situations, God rules.
Yeah.
And the one who gave us authority through government and classroom and church and home and all the other places where, thank God, we have authority, is also the one who deserves the highest authority. So first commandment trumps the fourth commandment on those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example, from, what is that, Acts 4, I guess. Yeah. We must obey God rather than men. I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have agreed with that one. Yeah. They hadn't heard that Bible verse yet, but they believed the concept. This is, and we're gonna get deeper into the story here, but I'm wondering if any examples come to mind in your guys' minds. Are there particular times maybe for the Christian today being tempted or being trying, maybe we might feel forced to bow down, so to speak, maybe not literally, I don't see a lot, I don't have that happen to me a lot where someone is beckoning me to bow down to an actual idol or something. I don't know, maybe you guys, I don't know what goes on in everyone's life, but there are certainly times where we are being asked to or tempted to maybe compromise our beliefs or bow down in a manner of speaking to something or someone other than the one true God.
Well,
Got one?
Go for
well,
it.
I was going to say, this is we were talking about this the other day. I think often it's a more subtle kind of thing where, we're not going to have completely out of the blue somebody saying bow down, but I mean, if you want to get real literal, we bow down to these. You're not looking. We bow down to these, like quite literally, And so I think, as I know we've all talked about in probably sermons and teachings and catechism class, anything can be an idol. And so I think that's a little bit different direction what you're going, but just thinking specifically of the first commandment, anything can be an idol if we if we don't guard our hearts against it. But like I said, that a little different direction for what you're going, but yeah.
Well, we were talking, I think Monday at our staff meeting, the president of the Missouri Synod has put out a document on behalf of the confessional Lutherans around the world about a situation in Finland where the Finnish confessional Lutheran Church has the same stance theologically as we do, believing that when the Bible talks about homosexuality as a sin, that's the way the church needs to operate. Doesn't mean we don't love the sinner, and doesn't mean we don't have a ministry there, but that our theology says that homosexuality is a sin, not a part of God's original creation. Well, now those the two leaders of the Finnish Lutheran Church in Finland are being charged. I don't think they've been incarcerated yet, but they've at least been charged. What are they going to do? The authorities are demanding some kind of an action that would either renounce that theological position, water it down, use your language. And I think that's perhaps a harbinger of things to come in a world that is drifting further and further away from the morals that the Lord gave to us in the Holy Ten Commandments. And when will it come to these shores? And so I think the danger we've been spoiled by living in a land of religious freedom, and there's very little intrusion into our religious life because of the guarantee of the First Amendment, freedom of religion, that there's nothing government can do to impose themselves. But there are situations that are at least along the fringes of all that when it comes to, taking away your tax exempt status. If the churches don't compromise or don't change what they're doing, we'll make them pay taxes. Well, if that's what comes down, you know what? We'll pay taxes. Mm-hmm. But if they say you must stop doing that or you're going to get arrested, then we'll get arrested because we can't stop. There's a certain line when it comes to making a judgment, and what was the young girl's name in Columbine that, the shooter asked her to denounce Jesus Christ, and she wouldn't, and she got shot. I think that's an accurate way of putting it. So there are situations today. Yeah. And I think the temptation, unfortunately, or fortunately, is oftentimes more subtle. Mm-hmm. And it just comes to, let's water down our conviction so life is smoother. Well, life isn't always supposed to be smoother.
Yeah, that's true.
But we're not faced with the furnace.
Yeah. I think, sometimes, people will talk about, is there persecution today for Christians? And the answer would be in some countries, obviously, right now Finland, to use an example. But there are other countries, you hear about Christians being massacred, in places like Nigeria. It's you see that coming across the news sometimes. It's staggering numbers of Christians being killed, and it's okay, that happened again. That happened last month too. It's you're not even fazed by it. But then But then in America, it's like it's harder to quantify because it's not like our daily lives are like in jeopardy because of our faith. But also, you would have to say that there is persecution for Christians. It's more subtle, I think you might say. But I was talking about this the other day with somebody else. Like what, it might be hard to define exactly what persecution is. But what's the goal of persecution? Like what would ultimately be what is Satan trying to accomplish through persecution? Whether it's violence or whether it's smaller ways trying to get us to compromise our beliefs. What would you guys say? I mean, I think don't overthink it, I guess.
No, I think almost the worst strategy of Satan is to come at us without us even realizing he's coming at us.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the subtle.
Yeah.
I think of peer pressure among. We always blame it on teenagers. It happens among older people too, but for young Christians, for some of our high school age Christians, that they're not going to become popular. They're not going to become part of the cool. They're not going to become some of the peer pressure if they stand up for the importance of prayer and love of your neighbor and worship and Bible study, and some of the cool kids that don't believe in any of that are going to reject them, and life's not always going to be so easy for a Christian teenager.
Yeah, yeah.
In certain settings and surroundings, I always prayed for my daughters and my grandchildren that they would somehow surround themselves with other Christian kids. Yeah. And I think that's what's so important about youth program here at church, that they can have support rather than the opposite.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think, you're talking about, different strategies that Satan might employ. I think, ultimately his goal is obviously to make people fall away from the faith through persecution, whether it's you're afraid of having violence done to you, so you denounce the faith or even stop practicing. But it could be something as if I'm kind of on the fringe of my faith and I feel like if I keep at it, I'm not going to be accepted. I'm not going to fit in. I'm going to be alienated from that's a big value that we have. We want to have a place to belong. We want to be accepted. So I might weigh everything and be like, well, I'm gonna. So Satan maybe didn't use. He might have used a few rude comments from my peers, but he still accomplished the same thing that in another part of the world maybe he accomplished through threat of violence. So it's like very different in the way we would quantify like how bad the persecution is, but the end result would be the same. Mm-hmm. So I think, it's. I guess we can have a pretty broad, like we don't want to say maybe it's quite as hard to be a Christian in America today as it is in other parts of the world, but we can also acknowledge there is persecution, and it is very real, and it's just as dangerous if it causes people to fall away from the faith. So I don't know, anything else on that before we move on to the
This
rest?
thing is 90 feet high and 9 feet wide.
Is that how you measured it?
How come it didn't tip over?
They knew how to build stuff back then.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Some would suggest the 90 included a pedestal that might have been half of that length, half of that, how tall that was.
Yeah.
It's a big, my point is, don't they sometimes just say water towers are 100 feet high? Mm. So whatever water tower is in your
about right.
is in your community, that's a big God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. It's a big shot.
And did you notice too how often in the reading that I did, it says and other nations. Let's see here. Magistrates and all the other provincial officials. No, it's in the next verses, because Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar had just conquered a lot of countries. Mm-hmm. He was victorious in battle.
Yeah.
And so he's got a lot more than Babylonians that are being ordered here to fall down and worship. O peoples, nations, and men of every language.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who theoretically had allegiances to other gods,
Yes.
who now they're being
Yep.
forced to do this under penalty of death. Well, let's zoom in and let's welcome our Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, our heroes, into the story. So, Pastor Josh, would you read verses 8 through 18?
As soon as I can get the page.
Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods to worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. But he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.
Wow.
All right, a lot in here.
Wow. Wow.
One thing that struck me in this story and also in Daniel and the Lion's Den story is there's a lot of tattletales out there, right?
Yeah, there
They're
are.
just tattling on these faithful Israelite men. They're not bowing down, teacher, they're not...
The NIV says, you said Chaldeans. The NIV says at that time some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. So they had a motive behind their tattletaling.
Well, these guys, yeah, I think they are I see that word used in I think it's chapter 2 over and over again too, and chapter 5 I think also with when Daniel was interpreting the dream and then the writing on the wall. It does seem like Chaldean is like kind of a technical term for people that
Astrologers, fortune tellers,
wise men or something.
Fortune
yeah,
tellers.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're already kind of jealous by these young upstart Israelites who have gained favor with the king.
Tattletale.
Yeah, so they're tattling. they're tattling on these guys. And also, I thought bagpipes originated in Scotland, so I don't know how. I think that might be maybe a bold translation. But I don't know.
You know what Eugene Peterson does with that?
I'm curious.
It's like 4 times that it lists all those instruments.
Yeah.
He says, and when the big band started playing.
The big band. That's good. I like that. That's very nice. Oh man, I don't know what in the world a trigon is. I've never, so I have to do some research on it.
Maybe it's the version of the triangle.
Maybe it is. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's cowbell or something.
Yeah.
Like that. So I was really struck by verse 15 and what King Nebuchadnezzar says. I think we learn something about him here when he says, "Who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?"
Yeah.
How does that strike you? What do we learn about old Nebi?
He sees himself as a god.
Yeah. What God is there that can deliver you out of my hands? Yeah, he's setting himself up as a big deal, big powerful guy.
As an we don't want to call him an agnostic or an atheist, either one, right? But as somebody who yeah, feels that he's above all of the philosophical gods of all these nations that he's destroyed, and he's willing to just hug them all. Let's make all your gods happy. Matter of fact, if indeed this wasn't a statue of himself, if it was some kind of Babylonian entity or something, really he's showing his irreligiosity by saying, okay, I've dealt with 50 gods here in the lands that I've conquered. What God are you going to have that's going to deliver you?
Yeah.
So among all the many, who do you think you've got there, you three?
Yeah, he does. He takes it. The way it's portrayed is he does take it very personally. I mean, it's you see this with people who are used to just being obeyed.
Yeah.
No matter what they say, if someone doesn't do what they say, they get ticked off. They get torqued off. I think, is that what you were saying?
I did
last
use the
week?
word
Yeah.
torque.
Torqued. That's right. Yeah. And so it just shows you. I mean, he's in furious rage. It says in verse 13 that these guys are not doing. But then this is the most compelling part of the whole thing. This whole chapter is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say in the next couple of verses.
I'm amazed at how polite they are. O king, you know, they're not in his face.
Well, it's funny because I do think there's a level of politeness, but then we have no need to answer you.
Yeah. Well, I that is true. Yeah, they are very assertive. But it's pretty much like, well, we've already resolved this matter.
Yeah.
You've asked, we've refused. We feel right before our God doing this, and now they kind of say like, well, the ball is in our God's court.
Yep, not in yours.
We know, you can do your worst to us, and our God is able to save us. And we think he's going to, but if not. We actually have, in our house, maybe I already mentioned this to you guys the other day, maybe not. We have a sign that Melissa found at some Christian store, and it says, but if not, ... he is still good.
Cool. Yeah.
And it's just a reminder, I think, no matter, you lift up all these prayers, for instance, and you think, it's kind of like that, your will be done. This is my will. I'm praying that our wills are aligned in this thing. But if not, you're still good, and it's a powerful thing. But they're even acknowledging like, well, even if we burn up, our God is still the one true God, and he'll raise us up even from the ashes.
And we want you to know now.
Yeah.
Before we burn.
Yeah.
We want you to know now.
Yeah. They still don't think they're going to burn.
Yeah.
But.
You think? Yeah.
Well, because they say, he's able to deliver us, and he will deliver us out of your hand.
Yeah, that's true.
But they allow for the fact that, there might be a reason why God would let us perish, I guess. Here.
Really putting God on the spot.
They are, yeah. Maybe that was part of their strategy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, maybe as they're being bound and everything, I'm sure their hearts are racing, and they're like, how is this actually going to play out? But it's just an amazing conversation.
Isn't there an old contemporary song, praise song, old praise song? He is able. I can't remember how it goes, or maybe it's just like Bill Gaither's song or something.
I think I'm thinking of a different one.
He is able, and the way they say, we're going to put ourselves in the hands of God, and He is able.
Yeah. What is it? Is this like a comforting thing for you guys when you hear a confession of faith like this, or does it
inspiring?
Is it inspiring?
It's inspiring.
Yeah. Does it make you feel like this big because like you think that you would have bowed down?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's different ways to kind of react to it. I think.
After I have sat and spent all the time I could figuring out some way to get out of this mess, for me to rescue myself, I sure hope I would have the courage in the end
Yeah.
to put it in the hands of God.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it is inspiring, but it is also scary.
Yeah.
Very scary. My life has been so blessed. All of ours here in America, right?
Isn't Luther quoted as saying, like he's talking about the Turks, you know, the
Yeah.
big baddies of the day, like, well, the Turks might cut my head off,
Yeah.
but God will give me a new one.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
whoa. So it made me think, you know, I mean, again, thinking about persecution, we haven't heard as much about them over the last few years, but like, you know, ISIS was in the news all the time.
The images of those Christians kneeling
Yeah, about to
and,
be
and
beheaded.
bound and the sword.
Yeah.
All they had to do is say, I renounce Jesus.
Yeah,
But they didn't, and the
Yeah.
sword goes by.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine a scenario like in America that we would face that, but we know of stories around the world and just throughout history too, where people, you know, you think about the Christians put in the Colosseum with the lions and everything, you know, like
Yeah.
they're, again, yeah, they had many outs,
They
you know,
did.
to get away from that type of thing. They could have denounced the faith, and I'm sure, and there were some, but you have these stories of the early church and these men being martyred, and it drives, I think, you know, there's these stories. I mean, I guess like whether they're saved or whether they end up dying, just holding your faith that highly and trusting in God,
Yeah.
whether in this life or whether in the life to come. It is inspiring. Yeah, the word inspiring is
Well,
is right.
and in the life to come is the
Yeah.
secret to it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know that death is not the end,
Yeah,
if you are, you know, these things are written, John says, that you might believe and be sure, be confident.
yeah. Somebody said something to me recently too. I think it was in a conversation that Pastor Josh was into. We were kind of talking about, like, some people were like, oh, of course I would have bowed down. You know, I think I've just been weaker. And somebody was like, well, I think by the power of the Holy Spirit, we would do the same thing. And I'm like, pfft.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, but I think that's the key though, right? It's not
It's not us.
It's not necessarily that like some human beings are just that much stronger than others. I think it is that Spirit of God that would give you the fortitude to stand up. But anyway.
Well, I tell you what,
yeah.
these stories are given to us by the Holy Spirit
Yeah.
to be for us an example
Yeah.
and an inspiration.
And yes, and hopefully it's an inspiration where the stakes are much lower.
Yeah.
Well, no, the stakes maybe aren't as low, but the punishment or the, you know, whatever you might be facing is less scary. The stakes are still high, whether it's your faith is hanging in the balance, you know, your relationship. But okay, so here we are. We're at verse 18, and the story has not. This is like right in the middle of the story yet. Now we know what's going to happen. If you've never heard this one before, I am looking forward to seeing what your reaction is.
Whether your
as
face
we
is gonna
conclude the
change color
story.
or not.
Yeah. So, Pastor Buegler, would you take us through the end, verse 19, and through the end of the chapter, through verse 30?
Sure. And again, the opening line here in the NIV is, then Nebuchadnezzar was furious
Yeah.
with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Eugene Peterson says, Nebuchadnezzar, his face purple with anger. Anyway, was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. Yeah. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot, get this, that the flames of fire killed the men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. How much further?
To the end of the chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Wasn't it 3 men we tied up and threw in the fire?" They said, "Yeah, certainly, king." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God," interesting, of the Most High God, "come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. So Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angels and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." And the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Amazing.
What a turn of events, right? What do you guys think? Anything in particular stand out to you?
Well, this is the first time it struck me. Just interesting. Like, it's got to be one of those things where God's like, okay, do it 7 times.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he did it 7 times, for,
Yeah.
7 times being a holy biblical number.
Yeah.
Like that was a problem. They should have done
As
it
high as it can go.
6
That's as
or
high
5.
as it can go.
If it wasn't so holy, they would have no. But it's just a little detail like that is just I think God's chuckling like, yeah, go ahead, tell him 7 times, Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah.
7 times.
Well, and that they were tied up, I assume, hands and feet.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when he looks into the furnace, they're walking around unbound.
Yeah.
So the only thing that got burned was the ties,
Ties, yeah.
and yet not a hair on their head or their arm was singed. I mean, this is truly God chuckling in heaven
Yeah.
at the silliness of man who tries to take his authority and power away from him.
Yeah. Yeah, God does. This is going to sound so sacrilegious, but he's like a magician or something who like tries to add extra hindrances. In some of these, like I think of the story when Elijah and the prophets of Baal are like, well, let's just douse the whole altar with water too to make it even more unlikely that I would be able to send fire, and then the fire comes and actually like basically consumes the whole thing. It's just those details are just God's showing off.
Yeah.
He's showing off his power. Yeah.
The 4th man, that's interesting, huh?
Yeah, there's been a lot of
Conjecture
discussion about that.
That Jesus or not?
Could it be? Is it the
Messianic?
second person of the Trinity? Yeah. The Son of God? It's possible. If not, it's probably an angel.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's chuckling because there's a part from this VeggieTales where there's a guy like, hey boss, weren't there 3 guys in there?
Yeah.
Well, now there's a 4th one and he's real shiny.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Forgot about that. You've seen this more recently than me.
It's been like 20 years. I
Oh,
swear.
20 years? Okay.
Close. Well, maybe
it's
not
just that
20,
memorable.
yeah.
That's this VeggieTales episode. Yeah. And then we just see, the wrapping up. It's this whole kind of like inversion of what was going to happen. So these guys, first of all, they're the lowest of the low. They're being executed, and then at the end, now they're being promoted. So and it's the people who have been tattling on them, trying to get them out of the way. They're probably being punished. You know. So I mean, there's no. But then so Nebuchadnezzar goes from you bow down to this image to now like it's illegal to talk bad about their God.
Yeah.
So it's a whole completely different thing. But Nebuchadnezzar, And then even the next few verses in chapter 4, which we're not going to read them, but Nebuchadnezzar then praising the Most High God.
Yeah, what do you
know?
think, huh?
And then,
Is
but
there
then
hope for this guy?
immediately after that,
Yeah.
and he's having this dream of judgment where he has to become a beast and go live out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, Nebuchadnezzar, I don't know. I think there's a chance that we're going to see him at a mixer in heaven one day. There's a chance. There's definitely a chance.
By the grace of God.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the rest of us.
By the grace of God.
You know, this.
I mean, he's really no more unlikely than me getting in there. You know, I mean, if you think about it.
Yeah. You know, I just think about one of the consistent but more subtle themes throughout the Old Testament is, you know, back in Exodus, even back in Genesis, God talking about making his name known to the nations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we see that here and there. And here's God's name being praised in Babylon.
Yeah.
What are the likelihood of that, you know?
Mm.
And I just think it's a little glimpse, a little cracking in of how throughout all the world, all nations, all tongues are going to praise the name of God in a different way. And this is just a little, like, it's like creation couldn't stop or it couldn't keep themselves from praising God because he's just that amazing. And he's not officially acted in a salvific way for all of people yet. It's just like they saw how great he was, and it's like, how can I keep from singing your praise?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Yeah, we see that as just, praise of God cannot be contained so many times. I linked in my, in our worship services this past week, I linked these stories from Daniel to a teaching from Jesus in Matthew chapter 10. And I want us just to reflect on a couple of verses there. The context from Matthew chapter 10 is Jesus is sending out the 12. And I know there's some debate about part of chapter 10 in Matthew's gospel probably applies only to the 12 and in their specific role going out and preaching the gospel. But then, then where does it shift to instructions, even teachings for us, for every Christian being sent out today? But there are parts where it's kind of like, you're going to be called in front of people sometimes, maybe to give a confession of your faith, to speak up and to acknowledge God or not to acknowledge God. And that's here in Matthew 10, Jesus does say, don't be afraid of those people who can kill the body but not the soul. So I think going back to Daniel, don't be afraid of Nebuchadnezzar. Don't be afraid of the Nebuchadnezzars of the world. They might be able to burn you up, but they can't do anything as far as your eternity. Our eternity is in the hands of God. Mm-hmm. We do reflect more often on him being a warm and fuzzy God. That's kind of how we see him through faith in Jesus Christ. But he's also the almighty judge of the universe.
Yeah.
And he is just. But here in Matthew 10, verses 32 and 33, I'll just read these. So Jesus says, "So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven." Be nice if that was the end of the passage, but no, he goes on. "But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven." And so I think we see this playing out in the book of Daniel and other places too. It's this crossroads moment where it's like, well, are you going to acknowledge God before these scary human beings, or are you going to deny him? And
the reason I brought the Peterson paraphrase up here today was that was this verse.
Okay.
"Stand up for me against world opinion, and I'll stand up for you before my Father in heaven." So first of all, I really like that because of the application it has. World opinion today, folks, is drifting further and further away from where it was 200 years ago when America was founded and where it was probably when most of us were born. Mm-hmm. World opinion. Stand up for me against world opinion, and I'll stand up for you before my Father in heaven.
Yep.
But now, the second half of the verse that you didn't like,
Yeah.
if you turn tail and run, do you think I'll cover for you?
So what about all those things on Facebook where it's, it's like a picture of Jesus. Do I have a spot on your wall? If you believe in me, share. Is that what he's talking about here? Or is it more than that? Less than that?
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. He was definitely predicting about sharing things on social media.
I just think, it's as blessed as we are, and talking about some of the great persecutions, whether it's Christians in the lion's den or Christians in the fiery furnace. I think it does boil down to the great call that we have in the years that are ahead. This should be the glory years of the church, to stand up in the midst of world opinion that's going the other direction. And he'll be with us.
Yeah.
And no matter what it costs us. So
Maybe you were born for such a time as this.
born for such a time as this.
Esther, Daniel, they're friends.
I like that.
Yeah, verse 32 from Matthew 10, the one that everyone acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. I think that's, I think you can hear a verse like that, and it can have a function of both law and gospel in your life. So you might, in one breath, you might be reflecting upon, I'm so ashamed of the times when I have not acknowledged, and there would be different ways to interpret what that looks like. But, maybe I was in a conversation with other people and I remained silent.
Yep, I blew it
at a time. Yeah, and I mean I can think of
Thank
way
God.
too many examples of those in not so long ago, or high school years or something, when I was like, well, I don't
Thank
know
God
if I
for
really want
forgiveness.
to. Yeah, exactly. But then the amazing thing is knowing that man, Jesus is he's gonna acknowledge me
Hey, Father,
before the Father.
did you see
Yeah,
what Jeff Smith did down there?
hope not. No. Yeah, but just claiming us. I think that's the man. Just to think about that, and that's what he does. Like he claims
somewhere in Isaiah, it's that the verses that come after, I have called you by name, you are mine.
Yeah.
And though you walk through fire,
Yes.
it won't hurt you. Through the waters, I will protect you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it right, but
I was
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah. That was like on the cutting room floor. I was maybe going to try to work that verse in my sermon. But I will save it for a different time.
It was already too long. So I start this Bible study complimenting you and end the study cutting you down.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine.
Got a couple great preachers here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Blessed from God.
I don't know what the average Lutheran sermon length is. I know the Catholics have the shortest sermons.
Yeah.
There's a study done on that. Lutherans are definitely one of the shorter ones. But
Yeah.
Used to, in the
Reformed
Walther
are
days,
a lot longer.
In the Walther days, Lutheran sermons used to be like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That was before they had TV, though. that was when everyone's attention spans were longer.
Yeah, there's something to
Yeah.
that. Ron.
All right.
What you preaching on Sunday?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna ask.
Here, I'll use your joke. The Italian prophet Malici.
Malici! The last
Malachi.
book of the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Malachi.
Malachi. I messed it up.
Malachi.
It's me.
The last book of the Old Testament.
Last book of the Old Testament. Yeah, there's, a good kind of summary verse. Couple of summary verses. I, the Lord, do not change. Return to me, and I will return to you.
I love
A
that.
good summary of the
Return
Old
to me and
Testament.
I will return to you. I love that.
Yeah, so join us for worship this weekend. Saturday, 5 o'clock. Sunday, 9, 8, start 8, 9:30, and 11.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us today. Yeah,
God
we'll
bless.
see you in worship.